At 6, the government's ambitious new plans to make the UK carbon neutral by 2050. To balance out any greenhouse gases released, a big push for electric cars, renewable energy and millions of trees to be planted. Going green at home, government help in England and Wales to replace gas boilers in thousands of homes with heat pumps.
We'll be able one day to bring down the prices of green technology, EVs and heat pumps and solar panels, in a way that we so rapidly made microwaves and mobile phones affordable.
We'll be asking if the government can achieve its green goals and what the price will be, also tonight. Sexual abuse claims against the late Labour peer Lord Janner. A damning report says children were let down by the police and state. The elder brother of the Manchester Arena bomber Salman Abedi leaves the UK after being ordered to appear at the inquiry into the attack.
In the Canary Islands, La Palma's volcano is still erupting. Over exactly a month now, it's destroyed nearly 2,000 homes.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Scotland take a big step towards qualifying for the Super 12 stage of the Men's T20 World Cup with a second win in 3 days.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. In less than 30 years' time, the United Kingdom should be a net zero country, putting nothing into the atmosphere which would make climate change worse. That is the ambitious target that the government has set out today. Anything that does produce greenhouse gases, like industrial processes and aircraft, will be balanced by measures to absorb carbon dioxide, like planting more forests. The plans include £620 million grants for electric cars and charging points. It comes ahead of the United Nations COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, which begins next month. With more, here's our science editor, David Shukman.
Every aspect of life is going to have to change as we go zero carbon. And now, after a long delay, the government is laying out its plans. And the key to it all is a belief that new green technologies will quickly become cheaper.
The market is going green, and people know that we have the technological solutions to these problems, and they want to go green. And they know that we'll be able one day to bring down the prices of green technology, EVs and heat pumps and solar panels, in a way that we so rapidly made microwaves and mobile phones affordable.
There's money to support electric cars and charging points. And car makers will be told to sell a set number of clean vehicles. Hydrogen gets a push, especially for heavy industry. It is a clean fuel depending on how the gas is produced. And there's backing for new nuclear power stations, including at this site in Suffolk, but the details aren't settled, and critics say that none of this goes far enough.
There is still a chasm with this government between the rhetoric and the reality. My fear is this plan will not deliver the fair, prosperous transition we need, equal to the scale of the emergency we face.
It's very disappointing. We have a climate emergency, and a lot of these actions are not going to see the light of day for years. We need to be acting now, be far more ambitious.
Amid all the arguments about tackling climate change, the goal is to reach net zero. But what is that? Well, like every country, the UK emits carbon dioxide, the gas that's driving up temperatures. It comes from heating our homes, getting around, generating power. It's meant to fall dramatically by 2050, but if we don't get down to literally zero, we'll have to compensate by pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. The easiest way to do that is planting trees, but on a far bigger scale than we do right now. With solar panels on the roofs and everything well insulated, this green business park in Bristol is an example of lower carbon living. Cycling is made as easy as possible, so what do people make of the government plan to go green?
I think that some people are quite privileged and that they can spend that money, and obviously it's well worth it, but it's not available for everyone, which is another huge issue.
If I knew the outcome, the ins and outs, the beginning, middle and end, and the outcome of what exactly I'm paying for would actually stand for, I would 100%, as long as it was beneficial to the children of tomorrow, I'd make that sacrifice.
An obvious measure is better insulation. Many experts want this given a bigger push. And the government's independent climate advisor says more needs to be spelled out.
It's not a triple gold star. I mean, I think it's important to say that. We have a new plan for getting to net zero, and it looks like it's a more comprehensive one. But what we don't have, sadly, is all of the detail on how it's going to be delivered.
The government was running out of time to announce its policies. Hosting the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow next month, it is in the global spotlight. So, promising action isn't enough. David Shukman, BBC News.
Well, more than a fifth of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions come from heating buildings, homes, offices. And from next April, the government will be offering households in England and Wales a subsidy to help meet the cost of replacing gas-fired boilers with low-carbon heat pumps. So what are they and how much do they cost? Well, it will vary depending on the type and size of your home. They are costly, between £6,000 and £18,000. But the government will give households £5,000 to bring the price down. £450 million is being set aside for this scheme over the next 3 years, but that will only cover the installation of 90,000 pumps. Up to 25 million homes are currently heated by gas boilers. Here's our Consumer Affairs correspondent, Coletta Smith.
It's time for the final checks on a newly installed boiler. And like the vast majority of homes, this one runs on gas. James's company fit about 1,000 boilers a month across the country.
All people want to do is turn the tap on and get hot water and turn the heating on and get heat. And it's a white box on a wall.
Tom had just forked out for a new home when he needed to replace the boiler. So even with an extra £5,000 from the government, there was no way he could have matched that with his own cash.
You may want to make a greener decision, but you're limited by cost, I suppose.
Across the street, 91-year-old Lottie made the same choice. She got a new gas boiler because it was cheapest.
Not everybody's got that. It cost me over £2,000 for this only last year. So it's draining your bit of savings, you see.
Heat pumps work by taking warmth from the ground or the air, squashing it, which makes it hotter, and then pumping it round your house. Margaret and John fitted an air source pump to their home in Anglesey, and she's delighted with the results.
Oh my goodness, the difference it makes. Absolutely fantastic. Yes, it reduces our running costs, but it is costly to do it. It's good that the government is waving a little tiny green flag. It is not enough.
For many people, a heat pump is an expense they can't afford.
It's just not going to be generous enough to help them do it. We're talking about households for whom investments and long-run returns on investments in their properties, it's just a foreign language.
We all know that for the whole country to cut emissions, we'll need to change our trains and our buses and even the cars we drive. But lots of people haven't clocked that to cut around 1/5 of our emissions, the change will have to take place right here in the heart of every household. James thinks the effort of installing insulation and new radiators would put most people off.
Once they see the transformation that would have to go on and the upheaval that would need to be done in an existing property, then it becomes, right, well, it's maybe not me then.
Every home is different, so there's no easy solution. But despite this extra money, the government still need homeowners to be willing and able to pay for the change. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Pontefract.
Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth is in Westminster for us now. So what about the cost of this, not just for householders, but also for the government?
Well, Sophie, these are long-awaited plans, it is worth saying, and it's perhaps no surprise that they're being published less than 2 weeks before world leaders get together for what is a crucial summit on climate change in Glasgow. But there are two key questions. The first, as we've been hearing, is do they go far enough, fast enough? And the second is what is the cost, both to the Treasury and therefore the taxpayer, but also to families up and down the country. Now, the Prime Minister is keen to stress that this move to greener living doesn't have to be painful. The government says this isn't about making people buy electric vehicles tomorrow or swapping your gas boilers for heat pumps next week. This is about encouraging people and providing grants and support packages, so hopefully these processes do become easier and cheaper over time. Now, the Treasury has signed up to this plan, but they are conscious of the cost. They've done their own analysis, and while they haven't put any figures on it, they do talk about the impact on the tax system and the impact on public finances more broadly. So they are conscious that there is a price tag. And there is some concern too on the Labour benches, but also the Conservative benches, about how affordable this is going to be for some of the households on the lowest incomes who are already facing a squeeze on their budget. So this is a plan the Prime Minister will say when he meets those world leaders pretty soon, is that the UK is leading the way. The big challenge is for the government whether they can take people with them.
Alex, thank you. A public inquiry has found multiple failures by police, prosecutors and council officials resulted in child abuse allegations against the late Labour peer Lord Janner not being properly investigated. Lord Janner died in 2015, facing criminal charges relating to 9 people who have been in children's homes that span back 3 decades. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
Greville, later Lord Janner, MP for Leicester, well known, a keen magician, a man who was repeatedly accused of sexually abusing children.
Well, it was black and white, didn't you? You haven't a clue, have you? I haven't a clue.
One of the first was Mark, who in 1991 told police Lord Janner had assaulted him as a child.
It was like being embarrassed, feeling dirty, and it's something you wanted to keep private. The scars you can't get rid of, you know, knowing that if it had gone to court, you would have had your justice.
There were 2 key moments which prevented that, according to the report. In 2000, police didn't pass the statements of Mark and another man to prosecutors. That was serious and inexcusable, the inquiry found. In 2006, a prosecutor decided not to push ahead with the investigation, a decision which was unsound and strategically flawed.
This is very recent history. This is not 50, 60 years ago. It would never be acceptable. But we're talking about investigations that failed to properly pursue multiple allegations of child sexual abuse on the basis that they were children in care and wouldn't be taken seriously.
Lord Janner wasn't arrested. He remained an MP and he wasn't charged for nearly a decade, by which point he was too ill to stand trial. He died shortly afterwards. Justice wasn't done. Not for the accusers or the accused. No trial, and alleged victims abandoned attempts to sue in the civil courts. Lord Janner and his family had no opportunity to mount a defence. His son Daniel said the report fails to challenge our late father's innocence. It offers no proof whatsoever of guilt. He was himself the victim of institutional failings. But Leicestershire Police directed its response at the alleged victims.
I'd like to start off with an apology to the victims involved in this case, and also to commend their bravery for coming forward, and we should have secured the charges against Lord Janner far earlier than we did.
Lord Janner always denied the allegations, but because attempts to get to the bottom of them were shut down in this inquiry's words, the truth can never now be established beyond doubt. Tom Simons, BBC News, at the Child Abuse Inquiry.
The Cabinet Minister, Michael Gove, had to be escorted by police in Westminster this afternoon after anti-lockdown demonstrators attempted to surround him in the street. Footage shared on social media showed the Communities Secretary being encircled by police after protesters approached him and began shouting. The Met Police said there have been no arrests following the incident, but will review the footage. The incident occurred amid heightened concerns over security for MPs following the fatal stabbing of Sir David Amess last week. Meanwhile, police investigating the killing of Sir David have been gathering CCTV from shops and businesses near the home of his alleged killer. CCTV footage from a convenience store in North London shows a man believed to be the main suspect in the case walking towards Gospel Oak Overground Station. 25-year-old Ali Harbi Ali is being held under the Terrorism Act, and officers have until Friday to question him. The elder brother of the Manchester Arena suicide bomber has left the UK ahead of an appearance at a public inquiry he had been ordered to attend. 28-year-old Ismail Abedi has always refused to answer questions from the inquiry into the attack, which killed 22 people in 2017. Our North of England correspondent Judith Moritz has more.
Ismail, BBC News. Can I ask you a few questions, please, Ismail?
This is the last sighting of Ismail Abedi when I tracked him down in Manchester a year ago.
Why won't you help the inquiry, Ismail? Why won't you speak to the inquiry?
He wasn't prepared to answer my questions then, and he's also refused to cooperate with the public inquiry into the arena bombing. The bomber's brother has been ordered to appear at court this week, but that now seems highly unlikely.
We understand that he is not currently in the country and there is no indication as to when he will return. Ismail Abedi clearly has important evidence to give to the inquiry, and we urge him today, sir, to make contact with the inquiry legal team, either directly or through his own legal representatives. As he surely must understand, if he does not do so, the public may infer that he has something to hide, and so, sir, may you.
Ismail Abedi was arrested on the day after the attack in 2017. He was found to possess extremist propaganda, but was released without charge.
Last year, Greater Manchester Police said they were still investigating Ismail Abedi and were going to make further attempts to speak to him. But the BBC understands that a few weeks ago, he left the UK on a flight to the Middle East. And some of the families bereaved by the arena bombing have told us they're furious that he's been able to go abroad.
A friend of Salman Abedi's, Ahmed Tagdi, has been ordered to appear too, but has also refused to comply with the court so far.
Unfortunately, he attempted to leave the country yesterday and as a result was arrested, so we have a high degree of confidence that he will attend the hearing on Thursday.
A convicted terrorist, Abdal Rauf Abdallah, who's alleged to have radicalised Salman Abedi, has also been ordered to appear at the inquiry. Tomorrow, it's expected that he'll be brought to court from prison to face questions. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. The government announces ambitious new plans to make the UK carbon neutral by 2050. And coming up, a giant puppet of a Syrian girl arrives in the UK to highlight the plight of young migrants.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, there's a big night of action in the Champions League. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool are in the Spanish capital to take on Atletico Madrid, with top spot in the group up for grabs for the winner.
Now, for months, questions have been asked about professional footballers and how many have had the coronavirus vaccine. The issue has until now remained shrouded in secrecy, with several high-profile players deciding not to reveal their vaccine status. But today, the Premier League has finally given details, revealing that 68% of their football players are now double vaccinated. Our sports editor, Dan Rowan, reports.
The Premier League season may be in full flow, but persuading footballers to get vaccinated has proved a challenge, with rates trailing behind other top sports. Professor Jonathan Van Tam has led the fight against COVID, and today here at Boston United, the lifelong fan of the club told me why it's so crucial that top players get jabbed.
I'm mad about football. You know, most of this country is mad about football, and they are role models, whether they like it or not. They are role models, particularly for young adults and for children and young people. And so what they say and do really matters. We don't want, any more squads that are short, that can't fulfil fixtures because half of them have got COVID.
Liverpool boss Jurgen Klopp's expressed frustration with unvaccinated footballers, but today, after weeks of secrecy, the Premier League revealed 68% of players are now fully protected, with 81% having had at least one jab.
Well, that's brilliant. I mean, that's a a massive leap forward, isn't it, from where we were. And I can say here that at Boston United, of the total players and support staff, 90% now are double vaccinated. So we're in a very strong position, and I've had the privilege of vaccinating a couple of the players myself.
Despite the recent improvement, football here still lags behind top US professional sports, where full vaccination rates are above 90% and unprotected athletes have been subject to stricter protocols.
Why do you think it's taking longer here in the Premier League?
I worry about the influence of social media and the influence of untrusted sources. Of course it's disappointing when you see things like that, but I think the latest data from that you've just given me on the Premier League show that tide is now very clearly turning.
But what about the fans? From this week in Scotland, those going to events with over 10,000 attending have to have been vaccinated. These Celtic supporters this afternoon, the first to be asked for proof before entering. So could it happen in England?
It's clearly out there as an option, in as much that Scotland has now already applied that rule. I think we have to see what this winter is going to bring us. It could be very difficult.
In tennis, unvaccinated players are unlikely to be allowed to take part in January's Australian Open. Defending champion Novak Djokovic today expressing doubts he'll play. For the sporting elite, this issue not going away. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
Well, the government's latest coronavirus figures show there were 43,738 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means there were almost 45,000 cases on average per day in the past week. The number of people in hospital with COVID is rising again. It's now 7,749. There were another 223 deaths. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test, and that is the highest daily figure since the middle of March. Well, our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me now. So a fall on the number of cases since yesterday, but this highest single day death toll since, for 7 months. How concerned are the government now?
Well, Sophie, the underlying rate week on week shows that COVID cases, hospital admissions and deaths are rising by 10% or more. And that is why Downing Street let it be known today they were keeping a very close eye on case rates. Officials are looking at a new type of the Delta variant which has been detected, just to see whether it spreads more rapidly than Delta itself. There is no evidence, firm evidence at this stage that it does, but they are watching that, although they say it's not at this stage a variant of concern or officially under investigation. There's against that background that Amanda Pritchard, head of NHS England, when challenged by MPs about booster jabs, said that invitations were going out as soon as people became eligible. That's at least 6 months after the second dose, but take-up was not as rapid as it had been back in January, and she said it was vital people did take up their invitations because COVID, in her words, was serious and still with us.
Thank you. An 80-year-old former soldier who was on trial in Belfast accused of the attempted murder of a man during the Troubles has died. Unionist politicians have criticised the decision to prosecute Dennis Hutchings because of his poor health. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy reports.
Almost 5 decades since Dennis Hutchings was deployed on the streets of Belfast as a young soldier, he returned here to appear as a defendant in court. The trial's been extremely controversial in Northern Ireland, where the issue of prosecuting former soldiers for their actions during the Troubles deeply divides communities.
I mean, basically it came out of the blue after 40 years. Half the police force of Devon and Cornwall, and some of them from here, Belfast, came and arrested me.
Dennis Hutchings always denied the charge of attempted murder in relation to the killing of John Pat Cunningham, who had learning difficulties and was shot in the back when running away from an army patrol in 1974.
It was my job when I was here to try and help keep the peace, protect people, which I did, and we're being treated like cannon fodder.
Recently, several cases against former soldiers have collapsed, but there are several hundred others involving killings by both the British Army and paramilitaries which continue to be reinvestigated. What do you say to those families and victims who say they were injustices, and if Northern Ireland is to move on from the past, that people must be brought to justice in some form?
I totally agree with you. But let's talk about justice for people. The hundreds of other incidents, they're not investigated the same as what they're trying to investigate the military who were sent here to do a job.
The government has proposed ending all Troubles-related prosecutions, but it's bitterly opposed. Brigitte Voyle has spent decades searching for answers. Her mother was one of 9 unarmed civilians killed by British soldiers in Ballymurphy in 1971.
If there's evidence, real evidence there, it has to be used.
When you see trials collapsing and there seems to be such a small chance of ever really getting the justice that you're looking for, is it still worth it to bring these cases to court?
The public prosecution said there's evidence there that they done wrong. Of course they have to.
On both sides of the political divide in Northern Ireland, there is opposition to the possibility of a complete amnesty.
And the proposals which they have put on the table at this moment in time are not acceptable to anybody, victims groups, families, political parties. So they need to now get back to the bones of the Good Friday Agreement and deliver upon that.
What we need is a proper process that treats everyone the same and that allows cases to go forward only where there is new and compelling evidence.
Dennis Hutchings, who passed away last night, had said he hoped to live long enough to clear his name. Prosecutors say the case was in the public interest, but its outcome leaves resentment in Northern Ireland on all sides. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
A volcano on one of Spain's Canary Islands is continuing to spew lava 1 month on from the initial eruption. Nearly 2,000 buildings on La Palma have been destroyed and hundreds of people have been displaced. Our correspondent, Dan Johnson, is there for us tonight. Dan.
Yes, there are around 7,000 people who are away from their homes because of this eruption, which continues. And that volcano has actually grown over the last few weeks as more lava has built up and set hard in layers. And there's no sign of that eruption relenting anytime soon. There is fresh lava pouring from new vents. And over here, we can show you where the lava is actually flowing, because it's going right down the hillside here. Having destroyed homes, villages and farmland, you can see right across here down to the sea, all of that is lava that has flowed in the last month, having destroyed everything in its path. And there are fresh fires breaking out all the time with different forks of lava. Over 2,000 buildings destroyed now, so a really difficult situation for the authorities here to manage. But miraculously, nobody has been killed, nobody has been injured. But there is a rescue mission underway tonight because there are 3 dogs trapped in the yard of a home that has been cut off by lava. They've been fed by drone over the last month, but now there's an attempt to drop a net, actually scoop them up and rescue them. A really complicated situation for everyone here to manage.
Dan Johnson in La Palma, thank you. Now this is Amal, a giant puppet of a 9-year-old girl from Syria made by the creators of the stage play Warhorse. And she just arrived in the UK after trekking across Europe. She started her long walk in Turkey in July and has covered thousands of miles to highlight the plight of young refugees. Our arts correspondent David Silito has been to meet her in Folkestone.
Little Amal, a 3.5-metre tall puppet refugee. And this is the beginning of the final leg of what is an 8,000-kilometre journey. There have been many stops across Europe.
It takes you back when you see the physical reaction that we're getting, but also she's amazingly evocative, so that she's doing her job.
She has provoked strong feelings. In Rome, the Pope came out to meet her, but not everywhere has been quite so welcoming, especially at one stop in Greece. People were stoning a puppet arriving.
People were stoning a puppet arriving, which is nothing we expected, and feeling very strongly about it as well, shouting at her with everything they had.
And here on the Kent coast, which sees regular migrant arrivals along the shore, there is considerable local debate. Terry Mullard is a local UKIP councillor, and he wasn't going to be meeting little Amal. The event that's taking place in Folkestone today is all about raising awareness, about being welcoming to refugees. You would rather Folkestone was less welcoming?
Personally, yes. But I would welcome them if they came over here with a passport or equivalent documentation.
But by Folkestone Harbour, the crowds were out. This refugee was getting a hero's welcome.
These interactions are about empathy and about trying to be curious about somebody that you don't know and welcoming somebody that you don't know.
She may only be a puppet, but she's already proved she's a provocative and powerful piece of theatre. David Solotto, BBC News, Folkestone.
And finally, the Queen may be 95 years old, but she has turned down the Oldie of the Year award, saying you are only as old as you feel. In a letter written by her assistant private secretary, it says the Queen sends her warmest best wishes, but does not believe she meets the relevant criteria to be able to accept the award. The prize went instead to the French actress Leslie Caron, who is 90. Time now for a look at the weather with Thomas Schaffenacker. Hello, Thomas.
Hi there, Sophie. It's been a bizarre day of weather across the UK today. We've had strong winds, some showers, but yet the temperatures got up to 21 degrees Celsius in parts of East Anglia and the southeast, so really quite a warm day. And if we have a look at the reason, it's this current of warm air which has actually originated from the tropics. In fact, if we trace it back, look at the wind arrows. So we're across the North Atlantic now. These are the Azores here. Here's the coast of the United States and Canada, and here we have the Caribbean. So that's where the air's come from. That does sometimes happen. It's a little unusual, but there's still a lot of energy in that current of air that's over us right now in terms of strong winds, and there are weather fronts crossing the country right now. And look at these temperatures. These are the overnight temperatures. So it's 16 degrees, no lower than that in the south overnight. A bit fresher in our northern climes in Scotland and Northern Ireland, around 9 degrees. Now tomorrow it's going to be a changeable day. It's still going to be very mild. We still have that rush of wind from the tropics. There'll be showers, perhaps some thunderstorms, gusty winds, some hail as well, and all mixed in with some sunshine too. So not 21 degrees, but 18, which I'm sure you would agree is warm enough for this time of the year. Thursday, a complete change. In fact, it'll be a shock to the system. The wind is going to do almost a 180. So rather than coming in from the southern climes, the wind is going to blow around this area of low pressure and actually come from the north. So rather than tropical air, we're going to have Arctic air. I mean, it's not going to be cold enough for snow, but maybe across the mountains of Scotland. But with the strong winds up to gale force, it really will feel quite chilly. So we'll need our coats. So today it was practically t-shirts in the south of the country. By Thursday, we're talking about thick coats with those strong winds. Friday, not looking bad at all.
Thomas, thank you. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC News teams where you are. Goodbye.